to a brand new episode of Rediscovered Movies. I'm your host, Nomfanelo Malloy. In honor of this film that I'll be discussing with you guys, I am wearing Michael Jackson because this artist was featured as a poster in this film. Classic in ways, this 80s film, dance film, it's called Fast Forward. This film was directed by Sidney Poitier, who's known for directing films such as Uptown Saturday Night and Stir Crazy, but most of you will probably know him as an actor who has done notable films such as In the Heat of the Night and Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. The film stars Don Franklin, Tamara and John Scott Clough. So pretty much this film, it focuses on this group, this eight teens from Ohio. They pretty much travel to New York to get a shot at stardom through this competition. The film was released in theaters on February 15th, 1985. It didn't do well. It opened at number 11 with over $1.5 million. Films such as Beverly Hills Cop, Witness, and The Breakfast Club beat this movie at the box office. During its short theatrical run, it made over $2.7 million. There's no critics score for this on Rotten Tomatoes, but it has a 83% audience score. From the reviews that I could find at the time, it seemed like critics did not enjoy this movie. The film is available on video on demand, so check your local provider. Now, let's start with first discoveries. So I had the VHS of this film, so VHS tape. And I would watch this movie like from time to time. I think mainly because of the dance sequences, because it was just fun to see like dance movies like from the 80s where you saw like all sorts of styles happening, so not just the hip hop or the break dancing, but also too like with the jazz, the contemporary, the ballet, all sorts of stuff that was popular at that time. And the music also too was enjoyable and catchy. But I would say like the movie is kind of cheesy, but I do kind of get what it was trying to go for in terms of showing, people like from a small town trying to reach for their dreams in the big city where there's tons of competition. So when I watch this movie currently, I don't have the VHS tape of this anymore, but I have it on iTunes. So when I watched this before recording this podcast, I still enjoyed it because, again, I've seen this movie repeatedly. But I couldn't help but notice some of the flaws like in this movie, which I'll discuss later on. But yeah, it's one of those movies where you're gonna have fun with it depending on your mood, but because if you go in with this movie like with a very critical lens, you're not going to enjoy this movie. I can guarantee you that. But otherwise, like, it's just one of those ones you could just turn your brain off, relax, and just go along for the ride. Let's go into highlights. So, as I mentioned, this is a dance film, and the dance sequences are solid. For me, the ones that stood out for ones I enjoyed the most were Breaking Out at the beginning. It was at the point of the film after when we saw them at school, they head to this abandoned warehouse to rehearse. And it was just fun to see them wearing like the tights with the leggings and them just breaking loose. Another sequence I enjoyed was Fast Forward, which is the name of the film, which happened at the end during the shootout competition. Because comparing, let's say, the breaking out to Fast Forward, you could definitely see the progression because we see at the beginning and also most of the film, they have good technique, but here at the end, they still have the technique, but are able to let loose and incorporate different styles. And another sequence I enjoyed was the second challenge with the rival group with them winning because again they're able to let loose a bit and not be too uptight. Also too, I enjoy the how do you do sequence where they're busking like outdoors, and that's when Matt meets Susan Granger, who they kind of have some sort of romance happening, which makes Matt's girlfriend June jealous. So yeah, like I love the moves. So it seems like with this the core group, it seems like it's more jazz meets contemporary with some ballet, maybe Broadway. Again, I'm not a dancer, but I think that's the best that I could tell. And also to the hip hop and the break dancing, yeah, those were fun to watch because for me, every time when I watch those sequences, like I want to try to do the moves. I'm not like the best at doing at it, but it's just like a fun way to learn some moves, even though it could be outdated today. What I also appreciated about this movie was the cinematography. Like it was pretty much basic because you see today, like in modern movies, let's just take with action movies for example, they use lots of like quick cuts and like the fast paced editing and all that stuff, I guess, to make it more intense for the viewer, but at the same time it's hard to tell what is going on in the scene. The Bourne films are examples of doing that movement. So with this film, I liked how it wasn't too flashy. You could tell like what they're doing with the moves. It's very clear. But yeah, like with dance films of today, I'm sure there are exceptions. They tend to be too flashy with the cinematography. An example is this film on Netflix called Work It with Sabrina Carpenter, Liza Koshy, and Jordan Fisher. Because when I saw it at the time, they use lots of quick cuts. I mean, yes, like it kind of keeps the pace going, but at the same time, like, what is happening? Another highlight. I love the baseball scene when the group decides to have fun to kind of cure their homesickness. So when they're together in their element, like they clearly have chemistry. I'm not sure like if the cast spent time together before this movie or they just, you know, figured out as they went while making the film, but either way, I believed it. New York City has plenty of personality in this film. You could see like with when they show the locations, the people, like everyone is just having fun with this movie. Well, not everybody, but also too like you see all the sorts of people like in this film. with the dancers and you could say the elite and just like the regular people. That was a fun vibe. Meryl, I felt bad for Meryl in this movie because she, I would say, out of the majority of the group, went through a lot of stuff. Because we see like she's kind of the most hesitant one to leave Ohio. Probably out of fear because of her parents. Or is just too scared to take chances in the big city. Again, I don't know. But also too, we see that she kind of like goes through a lot of things. So we have like I guess they're credited as hoodlums, but they're kind of more as creeps, where they're always like hanging out at the outside of the apartment. So she pretty much gets constantly harassed by the hoodlums. Well, twice actually in the film. So there's the first time, like after she tries to call her parents from the payphone, she heads back inside, and then one of them, tries to harass her until Francine comes to rescue her. And then the second time, she's heading home with Francine, and the hoodlums, they stop the women, trying to flirt with them and all that stuff. But it was kind of funny, but also awesome that they pretty much defended themselves by kicking them in their jewels. And speaking of that, when Francine teaches the women self-defense, this was after like the first attempt with the hoodlum, with one of the guys harassing Meryl, because she seems, Francine, as a tough as nails type character. So yeah, she pretty much doesn't take no shit from anyone. So like, we have another moment with her when they're all at the bar in the later half of the film. She pretty much tells them, "Oh, men are dogs." This was like after when June, she pretty much had enough of Matt after him having a thing with Susan. But also to connecting to the bar scene, they're kind of like scared to having like similar fate as their parents in terms of being stuck at their small town, taking care of the family. That felt like a heartfelt moment for the group. And as a vintage film, you can't really like have it without montages. Most notable one for me was when they are visiting various, well, I would say probably it was one club, but even though it was supposed to be probably a couple. So they're seeing like everyone doing all sorts of moves while Taste is playing in the background, and then they try to mimic the moves, which was great. And Clem Friedkin as the villain. I mean, that was entertaining. When I first saw this guy, like, I said, oh, he kind of looks like a younger version of Sylvester Stallone. My opinion. And so back to him. So he is the typical villain. So essentially he runs this, I guess, talent agency called Sable and Associates that used to be run by, I forgot the husband's name. Let's just say Mr. Sable and his wife Ida. So pretty much what happens Mr. Sable, he passed away while Ida retired. I just wonder, like, with her retirement, if she did it because of the husband's death, or was she forced out of retirement by Clem? I don't know. Yeah, and I wasn't too surprised with Clem's actions in the film because when he first meets Matt and Michael like at the office, he kind of seems, certain that the group is not going to fit well like with his agenda in terms of what he's looking for. So I wasn't too surprised like when he tells like them that, oh, I'm going out of town for 3 weeks and let me talk to you then. But then when that time came up, he pretty much refuses to give them a shot at the competition, which is a dick move. So essentially, Clem here is an asshole. I guess for the sake of being an asshole. And Ida, I like Ida. Ida's a sweetheart. Because so when the group, Michael and Matt, meet Ida, and they tell them, like, she remembers them because they were waiting tables, like, when she was with the husband at the time. And then the husband's like, oh, like, when you guys come to New York, I'll give you guys a shot. And he pretty much wrote that as a reminder on the business card that he hands to the boys. And lost my train of thought. And then like when so obviously when Clem refuses to give them a shot, they approach Ida. And then Ida's like, yeah, I'll help you guys. So she looks at them dance and all that stuff. But then when she calls Susan's mom, Jessie, apparently Jessie tells him that they were awful. I mean, probably not because of the talent, but more because of Matt's playing with Susan. And I'll get to that part in a minute in the Lowlights section. But yeah, like it was nice for Ida to kind of get out of her way to help these guys take a shot because she doesn't want to break her husband's promise, because she said that, oh, like he always has kept his word and honors it. But clearly Clem doesn't give a shit, so she essentially sneaks them in, and she knows some people that I guess work at the shootout where they're able to perform, and then the crowd, is wowed and all that stuff, and yeah, a part just remembered. So after when the group is celebrated at the end, it's funny that Ida, she kind of does like a hostile takeover where she's like, oh, I'm coming back to the office, I'm gonna take over the company. I mean, I'm sure that's not how it works in real life, but it was just fun to see, like, the villain being defeated, because clearly he is an asshole, and everyone here gets what they want. And yeah, it was kind of fun to see Debbie's dad. His cameo was fun because he was the sergeant from RoboCop, the original RoboCop. Because I think I watched RoboCop like a couple days before watching this movie, classic movie. And while watching this movie, I'm like, oh yeah, that's the guy from RoboCop. Interesting. And Caesar, I forgot to mention Caesar. I love Caesar because also too he looked familiar because apparently is the actor Michael DeLorenzo. He was in Michael Jackson's video Beat It. Obviously, I'm wearing Michael Jackson's shirt. So, Caesar, he's pretty much the leader of the rival group. And he kind of plays it too cool for school, where he's kind of like the bad boy type. And I had some issues, like, with, you know, I guess that's more with the script, but yeah, it was just fun to see him on screen because I recognize him from the Beat It video. And also, lastly, I'll say that out of the core group, I would say Michael is the most recognizable for me because he's done some TV work, and he was in also to that movie called Moving with Richard Pryor, and also too he had like a recurring role in Insecure where he played Malcolm, who I believe, if I'm not mistaken, is Molly's boss in that show. So let's go on to the lowlights section. Okay. So for me, one of the main issues of the film was the writing. What kind of took me out of the film is that we don't know much about our core group of characters. I mean, maybe to the exception of Matt, Michael, Meryl, and June because of their storylines, but other than that, we don't really know their names unless if it's mentioned during conversation or I don't know. Because I find especially with the women, we didn't know their names until the 40-minute mark of the film when Matt introduces the group to Susan and her date. Also, too, a low light. Where did the Adventurous Eight name come from? Because, again, like, we don't know much about this group because how the film starts essentially is that they have like a little montage of them like in high school where we see, I think, Meryl, like she's with her group of friends and she spots Debbie with her group of friends, and then it cuts to Francine sewing a jacket to give to Valerie, and then it cuts to Michael, his girlfriend, I'm blanking her name, Matt, they're in the music room where they're playing music. And then cuts to the breaking out sequence. So there's like nothing except that they're high schoolers from Ohio. They moved to the city, and that's pretty much it. But really, the only characterization we have, like I said, is the storyline. So we know that Matt and June are a couple, and obviously that kind of is on edge when Susan enters the picture. And then we have Meryl, you know, with what she goes through with the creeps that she interacts with and her parents. And I guess Michael being like the leader of the group. And that's pretty much it. So going back to the Adventures 8 name, so like I said, where did this name come from? Because that was only mentioned when Ida introduces them at the shootout competition. Because they could have been a moment at the beginning, maybe where they're rehearsing and they say, oh, we're the Adventurous 8 and blah, 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 and then they perform and so forth. Also, to a main question I had, are they a dance group that could sing, or are they a music group that could dance? That might sound like a trick question, but that's what I'm wondering, because I'd probably say they're a dance group because we see them dancing all the time, but then when they're playing music, they're lip syncing to it because I'm assuming that's supposed to be their original music because they mentioned that Matt provides the lyrics, and I guess Michael does the the music. I don't know. um, but yeah, like I felt like it could have been clear. So it seemed like yeah, they dance right, but could sing. So we never see them like rehearse vocals. It's just them dancing because if the movie wanted them to be dancers, just let them dance. But if they have original music to it, like sure, just have them dance to original music without singing, because obviously that didn't make sense. But if they're supposed to be like a singing group that could dance, we need to see them like perform vocals or something, like rough vocals. But I don't know if it's budget concerns or if it was originally the script or if it was a director choice. I don't know, but that shit doesn't make sense. Okay, now with the shootout, I'm not sure like what type of competition this is supposed to be because in the description it says it's a dance competition. But I argue it's not because with the two groups that go before this group at the shootout, they're all rock bands. But then we have this group that does dancing and singing. What is this competition? Because it seems like this is supposed to be the equivalent to like American Idol if it's strictly about singing, or America's Got Talent, which pretty much does everything. So yeah, that part should be more clear. I'd say the scene with Meryl and Debbie being attacked in the alley for me was not necessary. That could have been cut out. I felt like they put that part so they could bring like the parents in because with Meryl, she was worried about the approval of her parents when she was going to venture into this journey. But again, though, like the scene could have been removed because we had the similar scenes with the hoodlums at the apartment, which was more played for comedy. While with this scene, it's very dramatic and intense. I didn't get why there need to be a repeat of that scene, but done differently. And for me, also to a low light was that with the official soundtrack, which I could only find on YouTube, but I'm sure you could find it on Amazon, it sounds different from the film version. So I'm guessing with the film version, they probably had the actors, sing it, record it for the film. But then for the soundtrack, it looked like they had whoever came up with the music to sing it. Because for me, that kind of like was disappointing. Because it could have just had the actors re-record it for the official soundtrack, but I don't know. I don't know. And yeah, that's pretty much it I had for the highlights and lowlights. I do want to mention, I forgot to mention, yes, the posters. I enjoyed looking at the posters at their apartment because they had Michael Jackson, who I have the shirt, Prince, Duran Duran, Rod Stewart, and I'm probably blanking on someone. I'm just looking at my notes. Give me a moment. Oh, and the Police. Those were kind of like fun to look at, during those sequences. Now on to some trivia. There's not much fun facts, so I guess out of the core group, it's the film debut for most of them except for Michael. And this movie was nominated for Worst Picture at the Hastings Bad Cinema Society's eighth, eighth Singer's Bad Movie Awards in 1985. So I was just looking this up. So, So it was nominated alongside Godzilla 1985, Perfect, Porky's Revenge, and Revolution, which won the award. So I only saw Fast Forward out of the list, so I can't tell you if those movies are bad or not. Honestly, I haven't even heard about the majority of those films until I looked it up. And lastly, I leave here with this question: should this movie be rediscovered? So yes, I'm gonna say yes, even though despite its flaws with the writing, which there could have been some rewrites to make it, better. But like I said, it's a fun movie to watch. It's cheesy with the dialogue, and also too, it was fun to see like the 80s culture on screen with the outfits, the music, the vibes, all that stuff. The music and the dancing stood out. Because I'd say, like, you could watch this movie in parts. So, you could, the dance sequences, I'm sure you could find, like, on YouTube. And if you just watch them by itself, like, you'll be fine because there's no pretext, I guess, of some sort. There's no context. Plus, I'm sure, you'll be fine. And the themes I enjoyed in terms of following your dreams and all that jazz. Was fun to see it in this movie. And like, it's just fun to watch, I would say, 80s dance movies for the moves, but also too for entertainment value. So this movie, I would say, has plenty of entertainment value. Whether that's good or bad, that depends on, your outtakes, but you'll definitely get a kick out of this movie. So that pretty much wraps up this episode of the podcast. You could follow myself on Twitter and Instagram at Nomfanelo. You could follow the podcast on Twitter and Instagram at RDMoviesPod, and you could use the hashtag RDMoviesPod. If you listen to this on Spotify, you could rate the podcast and answer the questions for the episodes. If you listen to this on Apple Podcasts, you could rate the podcast and post a review on the page, which could be shared in a future episode. Also, too, you could submit questions, comments, and suggestions either by email, which is rediscoveredmovies@gmail.com, or you can leave a voice message at anchor.fm/rdmoviespod. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode, and until next time.